So I think David Corenswet's Superman might actually be the Superman we've been waiting for. Not because he's stronger than Henry Cavill, not because the CGI is better, but because he finally feels human again. When you look at Henry Cavill's Superman, he's basically introduced to us as a god, trying to pretend to be an ordinary man. You can see that the tone of his movies is heavy, the color palette is washed out, and serious in nature. And every fight feels like the end of the world. It's epic, it's powerful, but there's a distance there, like you're watching a myth unfold, not a person grow. And I've noticed this Superman rarely talks much, and often comes across as more brooding, which further deepens the disconnect between this version of Superman and the audience. With David Corenswet, James Gunn clearly wants the opposite energy, a hopeful, colorful world where Superman is a person first and an icon second. The suit is brighter, the city feels more alive, and even in the first look and trailers, people talked about how tired, determined, and human he looked. Let's give Henry Cavill his flowers first, because he is great at what he was asked to do. His Superman is this incredibly powerful, serious figure, visibly carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. You see it in the way he moves, the way he rarely smiles, and how often the movies frame him as this distant, almost religious symbol. His big fights with Zod, Doomsday, even going toe-to-toe with the Justice League, are shot like battles between gods. Whole cities getting leveled and buildings crumble into dust. The sky is dark. The stakes are always humanity might end today. And that tone turned a lot of people on and a lot of people off at the same time. Even Cavill's look pushes that godlike image. The Man of Steel suit is textured, almost alien-like, with muted colors, and his first reveal shot has him holding a vault door in a dark, moody frame that many fans initially criticized as being too gritty and serious. You respect the Superman, but you don't necessarily feel like you could sit next to him in a diner and talk about your day. Now jump to David Corenswet's Superman, and the whole philosophy shifts. From the first marketing, fans picked up on how much more hopeful and sincere this version feels. Bright colors, a living metropolis, and yes, even crypto showing up and instantly becoming a fan favorite. Instead of asking, what if a god walked among us? This movie asks, what if a good man with impossible power still had to get up, go to work, and try not to disappoint the people he loves? Corenswet's performance leans into that duality. I noticed he uses a hyper-pitched, almost dorky voice as Clark Kent, and a deeper, more confident tone as Superman. A classic move that instantly sells the idea that these are two sides of the same guy, not just Superman in glasses. In the fights, he's still insanely powerful, but the focus people keep talking about is how vulnerable and emotional he feels while doing it. Reviewers describe his Superman as deeply human, someone we can actually care about. This is where I think Corenswet really pulls ahead for me. James Gunn's Superman, with Corenswet at the center, tries to reconnect with that classic idea of Superman as a symbol of hope. Those bright skies, more comic-accurate suit, and a Clark Kent who's awkward, kind, and clearly loves people. It feels less like a god deciding whether humanity deserves saving, and more like a guy who loves his neighbors, trying to live up to an impossible standard. Both versions obviously deal with pressure, but the flavor is different. Cavill's Superman feels crushed by expectations and fear. Corenswet feels driven by compassion and responsibility. One carries the burden like a cross, the other carries it like a promise. Here's the funny part. When people compare Cavill versus Corenswet, now a lot of conversation online is about who's stronger. Cavill has the insane feats, trading blows with Zod, surviving a nuke, fighting Doomsday, manhandling other heroes. Corenswet by design has been described as a bit weaker in terms of raw, overpowered spectacle, so that the rest of the DC universe can still matter around him. But I honestly think that's what makes him better as a character. Yes, Cavill's Superman might beat Corenswet in a pure power scaling video, but Corenswet feels more vulnerable, which makes his choices more meaningful. If a character can shrug off almost anything, their sacrifices don't feel as impactful. If there's a genuine chance they'll fail or get hurt, suddenly every decision hits harder, and that carries into the human side too. Cavill's Clark Kent is almost as heavy and reserved as a Superman. You rarely forget that this guy is an alien god. Corenswet's Clark, though, is intentionally more distinct. Higher voice, more awkward body language, visually softer and more normal, which opens up way more space for comedy, warmth, and everyday humanity. For me, Superman has never been about raw power. It's about how a person with that power chooses to be kind. Cavill gave us the god who's trying to figure out if he even belongs there, which is a cool, modern, almost tragic take. Corenswet is giving us the opposite, a man who absolutely belongs here, who loves Earth, who just happens to be strong enough to hold up the sky when it starts to fall. Cavill's version put the super in Superman, and Corenswet version put the man in Superman. So if I had to choose who the better Superman is, I'd put it like this. Cavill is the Superman of doubt, guilt, and myth. Corenswet is the Superman of hope, warmth, and humanity. Both are valid, both are iconic in their own ways. But if I had to choose which one actually makes me believe a man can fly and still feel like a real person, I'm going to go with David Corenswet.